The spice binds the stars, navigators chronicle. A worm's shadow coils beneath Arrakis as a navigator's eyes blaze with visions. The Spacing Guild commands the cosmos, yet their fold space monopoly is a sacrament of dependency. Spice Maker, Sand Trout, Prophecy each cements the guild's fatal addiction. Dependency chains coils beneath Arrakis' Spice Crackmaker first. Yet their Spacing Fold Space Guild's monopoly is a fold space monopoly, was no sacrament of dependency, triumphantly, a gilded cage. Arrakis, Prophecy each cements the tether they guild's fatal mistook for addiction's strength. The honored matters return not with fleets but with a single weapon, the desert's silence, no wells, no spice. The guild's navigators, their minds fraying without the drug, became blind at the very moment the Imperium needed sight. A vulnerability centuries in the making. How many fold space jumps collapsed in the dark, how many stars turned to void. The honored matters did not conquer the Imperium, they merely withheld its breath. The Spacing Guild did not rule the stars through might, they ruled through knowledge, through navigators who devoured spice and glimpsed the folds in reality. Fold space became their domain. The Imperium's lifeblood, 1,000 worlds bound by the Guild's passage, but passage required spice, and spice required Arrakis. The desert planet's breath was the spice maker's cycle. A hymn of ecology and faith. Sand trout buried in dunes, makers birthing the harvest feeding the makers, of purpose the Guild could not break. They did not see it as theology, they saw it as supply, a resource to be harvested, never questioned. The navigators, their bodies altered, their minds shattered by spice, became gods in the dark. Their visions kept the Imperium from collapsing under its own weight. Yet every leap through fold space was a prayer to Arrakis, every jump a tether, every spice laid in wind a vow unspoken. The flaw was not in the spice. It was in the dependence, a monopoly forged in prophecy, maintained in addiction. When the honored matters came, they did not bring armies, they brought silence. A void where spice once blew, and in that void the Guild's navigators starved, their visions died, the folds sealed, the Imperium built on a single thread unraveled. The Guild's hunger for spice was a lock carved into bone. Navigators did not need spice, they craved it. Their minds, stretched thin across the void, could not unlearn the tremor of its absence. A monopoly forged in power became a noose. Ixian engineers labored in secret, threading machines that could fold space without tremor or trance. What does a civilization built on a single resource become when that resource falters? The Imperium's ships grew fatter on spice, their crews dumber for it. Blindness settled into the Guild's heart. The honored matters watched, their blades already wet with the scent of returning blood. A navigator's first breath without spice is a death that gags. The Guild's archives, vast as a god's, held no maps for this drought. Ixian gears turned, honored matters sharpened. The Guild's spice, once a god's gift, became a child's cradle-rocking, then shattered. The Imperium did not fall, it was unmade. A thread pulled and the tapestry of spice-fed empires unraveled. The Guild's navigators, starved and screaming, became the first ghosts of the jihad. Their folds, once bridges, became cages. The void does not forgive addiction, it feeds on it. The Guild's fatal flaw was not spice, it was the certainty that spice would never fail them. And when it did, the storm that came was not of wind or fire, it was hunger, hungry for blood. The navigators' chambers hummed with static, walls slick from condensation of breath held too long. Spice dust clung to their teeth like ash. They saw fold paths glowing faintly, but the tremors in their hands betrayed the cost each jump drained the last of their reserves. Outside, sandstorms clawed at the Guild citadels, winds carrying the metallic tang of rust and rot. Bene Gesserit acolytes, their faces streaked with dust of burned planet schools, whispered prayers to no gods. The honored matters moved like shadows in the periphery, their blades etched with Ixian glyphs that pulsed when spice-addicted blood hit steel. A navigator mid-fold glimpsed a vision, his own veins turning to dunes, his mind a carcass picked clean by scavengers. The Guild had built empires on a single needle's edge spice, and the silence it bought, but silence is a fragile wall. When the Matter's warships breached the fold, when Ixian machines began harvesting spice from inert sand, the Guild's ships sat frozen, their navigators too weakened to flee. The Imperium had not just specialized, it had starved itself. A Bene Gesserit archivist, burning records in a feudal pyre, wondered if collapse was the only true spice, bitter, inevitable, and rich with consequence. The honored matters returned not as relics but as reckoning. Ixian machines, forged in the shadow of forgotten wars, carved pathways through the void where spice once reigned. Navigators, blind to their own obsolescence, charted courses while Ixian gyros spun silent, cold, unerring. The guild's fatal flaw was not its power, it was its hunger. Spice had not made them immortal, it had made them addicted. Ixian tech did not mimic prescience, it erased the need for it. A single ship, unburdened by spice-laced navigators, sliced through fold space like a blade through veils. The guild's scribes, poring over tonnage ledgers, missed the fracture. The first cracks bloomed in the dark, a cargo run completed without navigators, a planetfall achieved without the spice-induced trance. The matters did not attack with fleets. They attacked with alternatives. Ixian devices, small enough to fit in a palm, held the maps of stars folded into their circuits. The guild's monopoly, built on sacred dependency, now trembled beneath the weight of its own vulnerability. No emperor could name the storm until it shattered the docks. No archivist could burn fast enough to erase what Ix had rebuilt. The Imperium's foundations, once thought unshakable, now bore the first echoes of collapse. A navigator, clutching his spice-laden brain, whispered the truth too late. Reliance is the antechamber of annihilation. The guild's fleets burned, their navigers screamed. Spice veins cracked under the weight of Ixian machines the guild had sworn to erase. The honored matters returned not as whispers but as storms. Their ships moved without spice, their blades cut through the guild's lies. Paul Atreides had not yet crowned himself emperor, but his jihad had already begun gnawing at the bones of the Imperium. The guild tried to hoard spice, to choke the markets, but the matters had learned the secret of navigation without navigators. Ixian circuitry, once forbidden, now pulsed in the hands of conquerors. Spice-addicted navigators watched helplessly as their monopoly dissolved. A guild lord once spat, "The desert cannot think." The honored matters answered with warships that did. Every spice shipment became a target, every navigator a liability. The guild's desperation turned to sabotage. They poisoned wells, burned spice fields, but the matters had already mapped the stars in their own blood. Paul's Fremen marched across Arrakis, while the matters dismantled the guild's thrones. Spice, once the Imperium's lifeblood, became its first hemorrhage. The guild's fatal flaw was not their hunger for power, it was their belief that power could outlast addiction. They had built their empire on a single mind-altering drug. When the world learned to breathe without it, the guild drowned. A final navigator, his brain shriveled, carved a warning into a spice rock: dependence is a religion. And all religions die when the faithful forget to pray. The guild's spice-fed vision was a house of brittle glass. Navigators, their minds fused with Melange, folded space for centuries until the honored matters weaponized Ixian fold space tech. Ships no longer needed spice-addled pilots to traverse the stars. The guild's monopoly crumbled. Leto-Roman II famine time starved Arrakis into dust, severing the spice veins the guild had never learned to live without. Specialization bred fragility. The guild's power was not in its ships, but in its symbiosis with spicia symbiosis that became addiction. When the honored matters burned spice fields and Ix replaced navigation with machines, the guild's navigators were not warriors, not strategists. They were prisoners of a drug that had once made them gods. The Imperium's collapse was written in the guild's own choices. Leto-Roman II, heir to a god-emperor's wrath, saw the guild's dependency as a weapon. He let the famine time purge spice harvests, knowing the guild would wither first. And wither they did, no backups, no plan B. Spice was their breath, their blood, their faith. When the sand ran dry, the guild did not adapt. It died, as all things do when they conflate necessity with permanence. A navigator's warning etched in spice rock proved too late. Dependence is a religion, but religions crumble when the faithful refuse to see the shifting sands beneath their feet. The guild's fate is a dirge for all who mistake monopoly for invincibility, and in the silence of their extinction, the stars folded without them. The guild's monopoly was not a fortress but a chasm. Navigators, bound to spice, became vessels of fragility, each parsec a debt. When the sands ran dry, their minds unraveled. The Imperium mirrored this, its gears too finely oiled by single-purpose devotion. A civilization of specialists cannot adapt when the axis tilts. ecology became theology. Spice makers, sand trout, and stillsuits wove a cycle turned sacred, yet fragility masqueraded as divine order. The guild's addiction was not to Arrakis' dust, but to the illusion of control. They mistook a closed system for eternity. The jihad's blades found the softest target, no backup routes, no redundancy, spice. The Imperium's structure, built on such narrow pillars, could not stand. A navigator's mind without spice is a star without light. What collapses when its name is whispered? The guild's fate is an echo in the void. Specialization carves a tomb. The stars once bent to their will know silence, and in that silence a question lingers. We build our temples now of code and circuit. The missionaria protectiva's hand was unseen, yet its design endured, turning spice from sustenance to sacrament. The navigators did not merely consume the planet's breath, they became its priests, bound to a cycle of sand trout and stillness, birth and collapse. Specialization carved their path. The guild's monopoly was not a shield but a chasm, no backup, no redundancy. When the jihad's blade struck Arrakis, their navigational grace turned to dust. What mirrors do we peer into, shaping our own myths of progress? Our civilizations rest on fragile threads: silicon, ideology, resource. The ecological theorem was clear: break the chain and the symbiosis dies. The honored matters did not conquer the guild. The guild conquered itself long before the first dagger fell. Does our world echo that same hubris? We trade one addiction for another, calling it innovation. The void left by the guild's collapse whispers a warning. What if the thing we rely on, the thing we venerate, is the same thing that unmoors us? The question is no longer why they fell. It is what have we built that we cannot imagine losing. Herbert saw the trap in the gift. The guild's navigators, bound to spice like moths to flame, mapped the cosmos yet starved of vision beyond their addled minds. Prescience, that double-edged blade, caged Paul even as it crowned him. The spice-maker sandtrout cycle, sacred and sly, turned faith into fuel, each grain a chain. Their monopoly was no shield but a siren song, centuries of power built on a single throaty resource. When the jihad storm came, they could not see it turning in the sand. No alternative sources, no escape from Arrakis' chokehold. The honored matters did not need ships to destroy them. Navigators, half god and half ghost, crumbled first. The future belongs to those who can see the interplay of forces, Herbert warned. The guild saw only their spice, the rest became dust. What is a god but a creature too blind to taste its own decay? The spice hung thick, acrid in the air, as navigators' eyes glazed in their cribs. They charted paths through the stars, yet could not see the noose tightening around their throats. A navigator's final scream, drowned by static, warned two Ladeth Guild's ships, once invincible, now drifted blind. While the Bene Gesserit bled in the shadows, weaving traps with threads of love and vengeance, the guild feasted on its own hubris. Subscribe.